All right. So if somebody has an opening prayer, poem, written word.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
I didn't prepare anything, sorry.
It's
I'll
okay.
be happy to.
Perfect.
Okay. As we come together in a community and we come into the consciousness of prayer, the reverent part of us opens up, and our consciousness identifies with the God or goddess within. And in that identification, in that resemblance, we move and have our being. And we express our God and godliness as peace and joy and love and harmony. And within that is all the healing elements that penetrate our physical, emotional, mental bodies. And as we come together and celebrate life and honor the presence of God within each of us by being exactly who we are and living our life purpose. And today we listen to the life purpose of Be, who shares with us her journey. And so it is. Amen.
And so it is. Okay, thank you, Charlie. I am been looking forward to this one, B. I think we have a lot in common in several ways. This is going to be fun.
I agree. It was fun to talk to you beforehand to get ready for this. So thanks.
Yes. And to start out on that with the shared history, we have a shared origin story within the ministry. Would you like to tell us a bit about your experience in the priestess process?
Sure. I did a year-long series of workshops with Anya McAndrew back in 2007, 2008. And in February of 2008, we had our ordination in Seattle. And it was just an interesting whole journey with that experience. Anya hated the name of our group. And she actually tried to get us to not use the one that we wanted to. But we just really stuck to our guns and said, no, this is who we are. I don't remember how many people. There was like 8 or 9 people. And everyone but one person in the group were sex workers in various different fields. And also very witchy. And so the name of our group was Witches, Bitches, and Whores, which Anya hated, but we really loved and embraced, you know. It's like that self-empowerment when you take the derogative term and you take it on and say, no, this is who we are, you know. So and just the whole, like, you know, the holotropic breathwork workshop that she had as part of that was really interesting for me. Personally, I had a really, really intense past life regression because of that holotropic breathwork class. I had visions of 2 different lifetimes of being a witch, and one I was burned at the stake. And the other one is, I think, in Salem, where they drowned people, you know, and if you drowned, then you're innocent. But if you lived, you're a witch, you know. But in that memory, I had a daughter at that time who witnessed the drowning. And I feel like that's my mother in this lifetime, which helped me understand why she, like, freaked out when I was in middle school, and, like, you know, the Salem witchcraft trials came up as like part of our lessons, and I checked out a book about it, and she just lost her mind. And so, you know, that fear of what can happen, I think, carried over into this life. So that was part of my personal experience with that. And also just it was amazing on February in Seattle. We had such a beautiful day that day. It was so warm out that I wore like a topless shirt. I mean, just a bustier shirt, and I didn't even need a coat. It was just for Seattle in February. That was kind of amazing. But it was beautiful. And I shortly after, got sick from the mold exposure that happened in 2009. And then I really didn't go and do anything with this ministry work. And I came back to Madonna during COVID and got reordained because I know all of you all lost all those paper records in Arizona, unfortunately. Nikki told me, and not that you guys lost them, someone tossed them, but they were lost to us. And it's been really nice to come back to Madonna and just be a part of the community again. I've gotten a lot out of it, and I feel like I have a lot more to give if I can just get myself disciplined enough to do more, which I'm feeling challenged about. I think I'm in a little bit of a autistic burnout right now, and I just realized that, and I'm trying to kind of get myself up and out of that. But yeah, that has been an interesting journey. Anya was a really interesting and fun person to do that process with. Yeah, you're nodding, and you felt that way as well. I've since lost, touch with her, and I think her views on some things have shifted where it doesn't feel resonant with me anymore. So, that happens sometimes. But I was glad to come back to Madonna in general and reconnect. So, yeah, that's the nutshell version so far.
I love that. Our circle, our first circle name was Turtle Circle, but our shadow name was Snapping Turtles with Dirty Mouths.
Ah!
That makes
That's
perfect sense to
funny.
me. And you spoke a little bit about several people in your circle being involved in sex work. What would you like to share about your work with sacred sexuality and Tantra? And also, with that, what are some misconceptions about how and why people are involved in this area that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think you and I had a good little conversation on our pre-interview about this. Sex work is a term that is a kind of a political term that people came up with, that a vast array of people who engage in work where they're, doing work for money, and there's sexual energy connected with that. And so that could be a dancer at a strip club, although many of those people don't like to use that word or that term. It could also be someone who does like phone work, or there's people who are trafficked and coerced that are under that umbrella as well. And those are the people that do need help. But there are a lot of people who are in choice sex workers. There are even organizations that advocate for sex workers' rights. December 17th is the International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers. And there's a lot of organizations that do events on that day every year to help bring awareness to that. And I think my focus was in Tantra and sacred sexuality. And when I say that, I feel like my job was to help people use raising their sexual energy to fuel their life, to reconnect with their spirit, potentially to help reconnect in their relationships in their lives. And that could be an intimate relationship or even other relationships outside of it, but just raising that energy for yourself. And I did that for about 14 years. And if I hadn't had the mold illnesses kind of take me out, I had planned to go on and maybe be teaching at this point. But everything kind of stopped in life. But it was a really fun and amazing career. I got to travel. Farthest was London. I got to go to New York. I had like a part-time place there for a year and a half, and I went there on and off for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years. I went to Boston and Chicago, and I went to the Bay Area a lot, and back and forth between Seattle and Portland. I was living in Seattle most of the time, and I moved back to Portland during that. I had a studio space that I rented for like 7 years in Portland. And before that, I shared different spaces with people in Seattle, and also shared spaces in those different cities that I mentioned. There was like a big network of people who, if one person went off on a trip, they would rent their place out to someone else, that was coming into the city. And it was just really an amazing kind of collective community through that. And I think, again, that term sex work is a political term, just to like denote that this is work. It's actual work, and there are times when there have been successful collective actions by workers to advocate for themselves. Like there were porn workers in Seattle who collectively got together and fought for rights around like camera usage and sensitive issues that were around that. And I think when people can understand that there are many people who choose to do that work, and then there are other people who need to be helped out of that work, it's a really important distinction for a lot of people to know and understand. And as far as like clients, I had a really rewarding experience with having many clients that I saw really grow and evolve from that work over time. I mean, one person was in an abusive to them relationship when they started seeing me, and I just saw that person's self-esteem and self-love just grow and strengthen, and they got out of that relationship. And by the time that I stopped seeing them, they had started a new healthy relationship, and I was definitely part of that. I've seen people who had gotten divorced, and they just were lacking connection and love and touch in their life. And there is a place for that work in this world. There's a need for in choice, empowered people doing intimate work with people in the world. And I hope that we can get healthier models of how that can be decriminalized. And I'm going to say decriminalized and not legalized, because there's a big difference. Legalized means you have a lot of red tape and regulations. Decriminalized means it's you don't get locked up for it. And I prefer decriminalized because we want to keep criminalize the elements of sex work that have been thought of a lot as the bad parts. And that is people being trafficked, people being coerced, people, doing it not because they want to do it, but because they're forced to do it. And we want to keep those parts criminalized, but we want to detangle those threads. So that was a big part of my journey. And I felt like a lot of my work in that field was a ministry work of type. I wasn't there for myself. I made sure that I had healthy personal relationships, so that when I'm there for my clients, I'm just there for them, and I'm not there trying to get my own needs met. And I think that's an important piece of the work that a lot of people don't necessarily think of. It's like people being therapists, you're there for your clients. You're not there to get your own stuff worked out. And so that was I think a perspective that I always kept in mind, and I kept that line really present and an awareness of it. So yeah, lots of really amazing experiences in that world. Lots of different like tantra workshops. That's how I got connected to people who Nikki knew. Like I got connected to a person in Arizona who had a temple there, and I went and visited there, and I never saw Nikki there, but it turns out she was well, you were managing it, right, Nikki? The temple that Des ran, yeah. So lots of interesting connections through that. Yeah.
I think, well, once we have consensual in the conversation, connection is connection. So I agree completely. That's vital. And different people need different means of that connection, which makes me think of another way that you've worked to facilitate people's connections with themselves, you might say, with guided psilocybin journeys. I know you've been involved with that, and it also touches on legalization versus decriminalization, especially in
Mhm.
Oregon. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so Oregon did an interesting thing. They passed Measure 109 and Measure 110 at the same time a few years ago. Measure 109 legalized psilocybin in Oregon in service centers with licensed facilitators there for the clients who are doing those journeys. And that came online in 24, and the first service center opened probably in the spring that year. And so it's not even been a full year of places being open, but there's now like probably a couple dozen of them in the state of Oregon. And I want to clarify that Oregon did an interesting thing, which I think was wise. There was a lot of advocacy work before it went into effect so that people could do journeys for a wide range of reasons. And it's actually not legal in Oregon to use your facilitator license and any other professional license at the same time. So if you're a therapist, you have a license, but you cannot do therapy with someone who's on a psilocybin journey at a service center in Oregon because they want to keep that separate. And I think that's a wise and cautious choice at this point to keep people who aren't as qualified from, doing therapy while someone's on a psychedelic journey, because it can be a pretty powerful experience for people. So I worked for about a year on trying to start a service center on this piece of property. And unfortunately, at the last minute, the owner of the property tried to put like a 3-page addendum about personal guarantee on there so that even if our business were to go bankrupt, we would still owe her money and we couldn't go to court about it. And I just felt like that was not going to work for me. Because it's a risky endeavor to have a high rent, which it was at that place, and to be doing those. There was going to be a few different businesses connected. We were going to grow them in one building and have a service center in another, which you needed in that county to do the service center. You had to grow them as well. That's that particular county's rules. So back to the beginning. When Measure 109 passed, there was also Measure 110, which decriminalized most drugs in our state for personal use amounts, which was kind of amazing. And what they were trying to do is to get more money into treatment. And so Measure 110 also was a mechanism to fund getting a lot more treatment for drug addiction in Oregon. Oregon was in the bottom 5 in the United States for the amount of treatment available for addiction. And that's, funding is a part of that, but human resources are a part of that. We really didn't have enough people to do the jobs, even if we had funding. And so it's been a few years of a ramp up. And one of the things that backfired is that by decriminalizing it in the way that they did, it made it so people could just do it on the street. And so a lot of people were openly using drugs on the street who were homeless or houseless in Portland. And so they actually repealed that, unfortunately, which then again included psilocybin when it criminalized it again. So the only way you can do it legally now is in a service center. Whereas it was decriminalized until they repealed it. Now it's criminalized again. So that's a big challenge. But I'm really excited. We're looking for a different property to do a service center on. So I gave myself a few months after negotiations ended for that lease toward the end of October, and just enjoyed the holidays and de-stressed. And now I'm, beginning the journey of trying to find a place to do those on, because currently in Oregon, there's no service center that I know of that has outdoor space for someone to enjoy a journey. It's all, as far as I can tell from the information that's available, it's all indoors. And I think a lot of people I know, including myself, have gotten a lot out of being out in nature during a psychedelic journey. There's a lot of connectedness that can come about from a psilocybin journey. And I think having that is a really important key. I'm not going to do a service center unless I can have a place where people can do outdoor journeys very comfortably, because I think that's a key component that's missing. So that's what I'm looking to fill. So wish me luck on that. And that's kind of the nutshell. I've been doing a lot of advocacy work around the Oregon Psilocybin Services Act since they passed as well, including being on committees that were reviewing the rules and going over things with OHSU, the Oregon Health Authority that oversees that. So yeah, that is my interest so far, and everything. Eventually I'll become a facilitator, but I don't need to be a facilitator to open a service center. And I felt like focusing on getting more service centers up and running, especially with that outdoor component, was more important for me to do. And I can get there's plenty of facilitators licensed already, and I can get mine after I get that up and going. So that's where I'm at with that. Thanks for asking about it, because it's a pretty exciting thing in Oregon here.
You're welcome. I mean, I live out in the woods on 250 acres. I completely being able to have connection with nature. I mean, it's getting ready to slam us again with the weather again, but it's worth it to have that can be able to step out the door and be in a different place. So I completely support that. That makes perfect sense to me. It sounds you tend to think about drawing threads together in different ways, which it's something like bringing the outdoor experience to psilocybin journeys. So that makes me wonder, what are your plans for the ministry in general going forward? Are there other threads you want to draw together in new ways?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, when I talked about my connection with Madonna, I feel like there's more I can give. I just need to be a little bit more self-disciplined. But also, I think there's opportunities for us collectively to, one of the things that I've been thinking about is it would be lovely if there was a short series offering that people could come together to do and offer. The name that I thought of was Ministry Possibilities, and that could be a series where people learn how different people have done different things that ministers do, like weddings and funerals. And when I was doing Tantra, I did conscious decoupling ceremonies with people when they, were separating. And those were really healing for people. But also, any other service that ministers tend to want to offer, like, I don't know, rites of passage, services, or, people christening their children, or having a blessing when their babies are born, or things like that. I think it would be lovely as people get ordained if we have some sort of offering like that to share with people. And so I definitely wanted to bring that up. So thanks for asking that question, to invite people to say if they're interested in helping to co-create something like that, so that we can, figure out, and the idea for Ministry Possibilities as a name is like, these are options. So like, as a person who has in the last few years realized that they're on the autistic spectrum, there's a really interesting thing that happens to a lot of people, and not everyone, but a lot of people. There's one woman who creates videos about autism on YouTube, and she talked about how she was currently a music teacher, like tutoring different, independent students. And she, of course, had taken many of those lessons herself growing up as a musician from individuals, as well as her, school classes and things like that. And when she went to become a tutor for music, she kind of had this internal panic. She's like, I've taken a lot of lessons, but I don't know how to put it together myself. And so she paid one of her favorite old tutors to teach her how to teach a lesson. And that feels like something that I kind of go through when I do new things. It's like, well, I don't really know exactly how to do it. And I kind of feel like I would really benefit by having someone like walk me through how to do it. And then she reported that once she had been, walked through how to do one lesson, she was able to then keep extrapolating and creating new and varied lessons for her various students from then on. She just kind of needed that extra, like, explicit, like, you do this first and you do that second. And like, when you and I talked, even how you file the paperwork if you were to perform a wedding for someone, or how to be recognized by your state as someone who can perform weddings for people, can be very different. And so the class wouldn't teach people how to go through that process, but like maybe where to connect in their state to find those things out. So that was just an idea of like something, if we want to get more people into the ministry, it makes sense to me that we might then also help foster people through ministering in some semi-official ways. I think a lot of us minister to people on a day-to-day basis, and I think that's a beautiful piece of what we do and very important, and I think should be honored as we have been. And I think we have room to grow and connect and like offer more. So anyway, that's one of my ideas on that. I also have some people from Portland Psychedelic Society Autism Group that are interested in doing the peer counseling course like I offered last year. And so I want to see who in this community is interested in doing that course this time around, and connect those two groups and offer that again soon. And we had already talked about that being a potential second step, that people can take that class as part of going on to become a priest or priestess. And so I think it would be great to kind of like formalize processes like that. Like, what does it take to go through these steps, and what are the things that people can do if they want to further their journey with Madonna. So those are some of my thoughts about that.
I think a lot of those things would be useful. I am sitting in a state that makes it virtually impossible to be ordained to do weddings. Virginia has had that for 400 years. It's just about every other state I'm good, but Virginia just says no. So, and that's one of the things you just may not know. Although there's not much of a way around it at this point, that there's a lot of people trying to work on that, but geez, it's the 400 years worth of laws on the books makes a huge difference. And as far as ceremonies, I think there's so many interesting things. I think you're right. Things like ceremonies with getting a pet or losing a pet, or moving into a new house or taking on a rename when you change genders. There's or coming out with your sexuality or whatever it is. There's so many things that we're not honoring as a culture that I think would
Mhm.
really help us. And something as simple as the onset of menses. We could celebrate things like that and not make it shameful. So yes, I think more ideas would be very, very helpful. I was lucky enough to be part of your peer counseling class the first time around and did learn a lot about it, learned a lot about a lot of people within the ministry, which was wonderful. And would you mind saying a little bit about the basics of that and how it works and you did speak already about your plans, just kind of a general idea so people know what you're wanting to offer who weren't involved in the first class?
Sure, yeah. Peer counseling is a way to teach people techniques to hold space for each other, to um, let go of triggers, work through triggers. So the roots of that are from RC, which is reevaluation counseling. And reevaluation counseling, as far as we know, came about decades ago. There was a group of people who worked at Boeing, and one of their coworkers, it said, pretty much kind of had what you might call a nervous breakdown. Like he just, I don't know what happened in his life, but he was like shaking and crying, and they were taking turns sitting with him, and they noticed what things helped him move through his feelings. And then they just kind of created a system where you not only learn these techniques, but when they formalize this and create a system out of it, they also started teaching about privilege and oppression and things like that. So not only is peer counseling, the series, teaching people techniques on how to hold space for each other, to help each other, work through things that are just going on in our lives, but also it gives us a lot of information to better understand each other, better hold space for each other, as far as, oh, I may not have had that same experience, but I now know a little bit more about that. Um, like people who are straight may not understand the things that people who are queer have dealt with. Like they may not understand the microaggressions or daily, or common comments that people get thrown at them from being queer. The same with people of color, people who are, seen as white in this, weird, uh, you know, race construction that we have as people, um, don't often understand the daily micro and macroaggressions that people of color have and deal with. And so some of the things that we learn about, again, is about a privilege and oppression and things like that of different groups and demographics. Um, and again, that just backs up being able to hold space for each other. And because it was a pretty small cohort, I think one of the things that I wish I'd done better is set up our group to have partners that are doing regular peer support sessions with each other on an ongoing basis. And I think I didn't really facilitate that coming about, but my hope is that having another cohort go through this, that we can then pair people up to have regular ongoing sessions with each other. And by that, like, not only regular, kind of longer sessions with each other on like, every other week or every week or whatever works for people, but also be able to do like mini sessions with each other. So one of the things that we talk about in peer counseling is doing minis. So like when you're having a major stressor or upset in your life and you feel like you need to, talk to someone about it to just kind of de-escalate yourself, you can then call one of your peer support buddies and do a mini and like just kind of take the edge off of that situation and de-stress about it. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit more about that and what people can get out of it. I hope that's helpful.
Definitely. I learned a bunch and I really enjoyed just the ability to hold space. Like you said, that was something we learned in the original priestess process, and certainly as groups went through in Atlanta after our group, because we were part of holding space for the groups that came after us. So it was very good to bring that back and just have more awareness of it again. And there are a few people on the call on this morning who went through the original class. That's pretty much the end of the questions I have for B. Thank you so much. But I'd love to hear if anyone had thoughts on the peer counseling or any other questions for B. I would appreciate it.
Charlie?
Yeah. On the humorous part of it, I loved your opening about witches, bitches, and whores. Now, I would think even they need mentoring programs, right? They need tutorial training, whatever business we're in. But yes, we have put together over the years different ceremonies, and we put them online for people. But they do need a practical, and that's what I think you're getting at. So a practicum worked well with a mentoring program with somebody that's already done it a lot, and that works beautifully if you find a mentor that you relate to. I think that's one of the regarding states like Virginia, regarding ordination. We can certainly perform spiritual marriages, even if they're, quote, not legal in the state of anywhere. And then they can be performed legally in any capacity, anywhere. But a lot of people do like spiritual marriages. And I've done some of those where they've been legally married, and it was not emotionally or spiritually gratifying, so they needed support elsewhere. So we certainly can encourage that. The last question I have is, not knowing much about it, you talked about a program where you use psychedelics and autism. I don't know how that works together. So maybe you could help explain the value of psychedelics.
Well, no one uses autism necessarily. You're either autistic or not. But I was referring to, I host a meetup group through the Portland Psychedelic Society for people who are autistic. And there are many people in there who are interested in taking the peer support class series when I offer it again. So that's why I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, psychedelics come in as a form of drugs, right?
Yeah, psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, even ketamine, MDMA gets thrown in there, even though it's slightly different. And the meetup is basically, they have a lot of affinity groups through the Portland Psychedelic Society. Like they have a grief group, they have a women's group, they have a queer circle, they have an elders group, and they have a group for people who are autistic. And we just basically, come together once a month on a Zoom and chat about our experiences as autistic people, and also about our experiences as people who utilize psychedelics in different ways. And, there's a lot of different ways. Like some people microdose psychedelics, and some people use them in actual therapy. There's ketamine therapy that's like federally legal now across, the country. And there are people who have used MDMA in therapy as well, which is really groundbreaking and pretty amazing for people who have PTSD. Both psilocybin and MDMA can help people with PTSD and things like that pretty quickly, more than just talk therapy, and like in really breakthrough ways. And yeah, so there's lots of different areas that people connect to that and work with it. Some people use microdosing to help treat their ADHD. Some people use it for depression. Some people use it to help with pain relief. And a microdose is a dose that technically you don't feel like you're high, but like, you know, psilocybin and LSD, they both literally are creating new neural pathways in your brain when you're on that substance. And so even if you have such a low dosage that you don't feel like you're high, you don't have any hallucinations, your brain is still got the chemical helping to produce new neural pathways. And so you can just kind of have moments where you look at something and you see it a little bit differently than you normally do. You're open to maybe a different experience of something that you're dealing with than you normally are. So yeah, lots of different ways that people are experiencing those things, and it's just a place where we talk about it.
Yeah, the other thing is, as you express that, I'm thinking that, you know, early on in my life, use alcohol to overcome inhibitions, free myself up to be more like myself.
Mhm.
I guess psychedelics may be helping people progress. Is that what you're saying?
It can. I mean, if you take MDMA as a treatment for PTSD, for instance, MDMA is a substance that really kind of blasts open your heart chakra. When you're on a good dose of MDMA, your walls kind of dissolve. Your connection to other people feels exponentially bigger, and it creates just kind of this feeling of like things feel really good and they also feel really positive and safe often. And so when people are literally using it in therapy, the reason I think it's helpful for like people with PTSD and things like that is they can literally bring up a memory of a bad experience that they have like flashbacks about and have a lot of trauma still connected to, and experience it in a literal different way because that heart chakra is basically kind of blown open from that substance at that moment. And when you can relive an experience in a safe environment, which is one of the things that we talk about in peer counseling. But in peer counseling, it's just kind of like dialed way down. Whereas like when you're on an MDA experience, you know, you're kind of like blown open. But some of the techniques we learn in peer counseling can help people in a safe environment relive some of those traumas and help de-trigger ourselves from it. So,
One last question. One of your opening statements was about you going through like past life regression. Did that require any drugs, or was that a natural progression through counseling?
so I've had past life experiences both in Anya's holotropic breathwork workshop that she did, which didn't involve any drugs except for the caffeine I was on from my yerba mate that morning. And I've also had past life experiences come up for me during shamanic soul work, soul retrieval experiences. I've had multiple work with different shamans in ceremony, and those did not involve any substances of any sort, except for, again, maybe some caffeine on my part. Yeah.
And thank you. You have a shaman within you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to make a comment about the peer-to-peer support group, which was really interesting because it got us as members of Madonna Interfaith community to get to know each other better. And even though we've been together for years and years in some cases, we still don't have the one-on-one very often. And so that was a really good experience, you know, week after week, going through, you know, different levels of depth of supporting each other and being there in the sense of, the ministry collectively coming together and being even stronger as peers. And I thought that was really interesting. So thank you. And I look forward to having that come back.
Thanks. Kevin, do you want to say anything about your peer support experience?
Well, I love the experience, but the problem is I'm not a very open person. So the whole thing was very stressful for me, but I made it through. Uh, I had an idea. You triggered a thought in my head, and that can be dangerous. Why don't we take one Sunday a month or one Sunday every 3 months and deal with an issue of what happens after ordination? And then I can start building a library in YouTube and have it under a separate playlist of anything that we might have discussed. That was just an idea. And then the other thing that triggered a smile on my head was when you talked about MDMA. Now, I was around and a frequent user of the original drug, MDA. And MDA was known as the love drug. So when you mentioned it opens chakras, it triggered a thought in my head. And then the government figured, oh, we can't have all these people loving each other. And so they allowed MDA and formulated MDMA. So it's still the love drug, but I remember the original drug and it certainly deserved its name.
Yeah. On that, there are people who, are chemists and they come up with new drugs that are just a little bit off from the original that's criminalized at the moment. And they give themselves this gray area loophole to, create this substance and get it out there to people. So it's something that definitely happens with psychedelic drugs for sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, one quick thing I will say, you made me remember, Charlie, in Virginia, we can get ordained for like one ceremony. But as far as, okay, I'm ordained and now I can perform weddings, no, not unless you have a traditional brick and mortar church. So there is a little teeny bit of wiggle room there, but I wish that were changeable just in general, because you have to plan ahead but yeah, but other folks in other states could definitely have more options when it comes to those things. So I didn't want to create the completely wrong impression, but it is very difficult here, and hopefully not the same. Hopefully other people aren't experiencing the same thing. Did anybody else have any other comments or questions?
I just want to thank you, B, because you gave a lot more flavor to what it is to be a minister and what the possibilities are in terms of breadth and depth of any particular topic. So thank you.
No, that's nice to hear. It
Yeah.
makes me curious, like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that, I guess?
I feel like you have done a number of things and are very passionate about it. And sometimes when we only know the title of what's on your resume, it's different than when you're speaking of it and going through it and giving examples of what you've been through. And so I really appreciate this dialogue because it personalizes it in a lot more ways.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's been one interesting thing about these interviews is we all come up at this in a different way. I have no desire to ever have a brick and mortar ministry, but honestly, something as simple as sitting down and writing every day, and then that goes out into the world. That's an important form for me that not everybody's going to want to do or even think, oh, wait, that's service. Of course it is. But I love hearing everybody's different perspectives on these things.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. I have a desire on this property that I want to do. I've always wanted to do something called the teeny tiny temple. And so I want to get like a little shed and like deck it out as like a little temple space and have it like just kind of just off the road accessible so someone can like pull into the drive and park and go into that space and like have a moment to themselves and have that, contemplative space. So wish me luck on manifesting that little brick and mortar churchy kind of a situation in Oregon here when I get the property going.
That's fun. It reminds me of the Mana Fest, which we do here in Hawaii every year. And it's basically mana is energy, of the earth. And they built for temporary on this festival circuit little tiny homes, and each of them was decked out in a different chakra color or a different ceremony. And those were really interesting to visit.
Cool. I love that. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Somewhere along Interstate 81, which is, I swear, 100,000 miles within Virginia, there is a tiny closet-sized church just off the interstate. I mean, if you could fit 3 people in there, I'd be stunned. And I've not stopped because it's definitely, but it completely exists on 81. It's been there for years and years. So I would love to see that in another area, from coast to coast in that case.
Nice, nice.
Somebody
I
built,
like that like closet size thing because then like it takes away like somebody trying to like crash in there for sleep or something, Like I like that. Maybe I'll like even micro it more and like maybe put some windows in there so that like you can see into it very well. Yeah, I love that idea. Lots of good ideas coming up.
If
you know,
you go through a lot of cemeteries, in the ancient custom, or I'd say ancient, 100 years ago, the custom, if you go through the cemetery of Paris, where we have headstones nowadays, they have mini altars built at each grave so that you can go into that altar, and it's only big enough to hold one person on their knees, and it's fully elaborately decorated as an altar. And that's what that makes me think of. And they're everywhere, all through the cemetery, and they're used instead of headstones. A
Nice.
poor man's crypt.
Cool. Love it.
Charlie, were you going to say something before we wrap up?
yeah, I was saying on Highway 8 here on the way to Arizona, somebody built a pyramid, a small pyramid, something not much bigger than what you're talking about. And it catches people's attention, and they stop there and they say, this is the center of the world. They built this pyramid on the center of the world. And then there's other places in different countries where they have like a meditation garden or a meditation room. It's freely available.
Nice.
Places like that.
On that same idea, just to mention, I don't know if it's still here, but when I was 19, there's this storefront in Portland, and it's the Church of Elvis. And like you can get married there. So I got married there, and they like it's just all automated. It's like a little, you put something in, and then like out the chute comes like this little package with like a little piece of paper saying you're married now, and like they had like candy and stuff in there. Just fun things that people do, and calling it the Church of Elvis, it's funny, it's fun, it's irreverent, but it's also a good experience that like is uplifting. So even fun things like that can be really good ministry work, I think, in some ways for people.
I think it'd be pretty humorous if you had a storefront that said, witches, bitches, and whores, place, whatever.
Yeah, if I win the lottery, I might consider doing something like that, Charlie. I like that.
Do you know if they still have the tiny, tiny little park in Portland?
Oh yeah, yeah. And
It's
there's like
over.
one tree in this tiny park that's literally like, I don't know, 2 feet like wide, it's like a circle or something. And people will come by and just cut the tree down. And so then, like, you know, a couple years later, someone else plants a new tree there. And then in the winter, someone comes down and cuts the tree down. It's this, yeah, the smallest park in the country, I think.
It's time,
Yeah.
and I sought it out when I was only there for 6 months, but I made sure to see that because I love that idea of such a small focus, but it focuses your attention. When I was in Bali, I saw, I mean, storefronts would have literally like a bowl of water that was decorated with flower petals and things because that was just the the store owner's intention, and as you walked by you could focus on that. I love just it does not have to be this massive temple. Just something you can hold in your hand can be that focus. So yes, let's have more of those teeny tiny temples.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll find another piece of property where I can do this idea. One of the ideas on this old property was I wanted to do a contemplative walking path and have different stops along the way, which were like altars or sacred spaces, statues, things like that, where you can stop and learn about a different religion or spiritual path. And I have a friend who is a rabbi, and she was on board to help create one, you know, for the Jewish faith. And then, you know, I have another friend who practices Sufism. And so I wanted to talk to her about, you know, and just do something like that on all these different like stops and have it be, you know, available for people for just a quiet moment, but also something experiential that they can touch or interact with or feel. And then also some information they can like kind of learn about it a little bit. So hopefully I'll have a piece of property where I can do something like that on the next space. That's a long-term project for sure.
But we're putting it out into the environment, which I love. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I appreciate you, appreciate everybody's questions. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for interviewing me, Kari. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you
And
all.
thanks for tuning into the interview, folks. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, Sally, we haven't seen you in a bit. How are you doing? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Sally.
You hear
There
me
you go.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm recovering from a very, very busy late summer, fall, and Santa Claus season.
Welcome back. Good to have you here.
Thank you. I've missed everybody.
Yeah.
It's been crazy, you know.
Yeah, we miss seeing you.
Oh,
You always have a lot.
it's nice to be missed. Nice to be
Yeah.
missed. And B, I really, really enjoyed listening to your journey and all the things that you have done. And I'm very intrigued with your thoughts on creating how-tos, if you will, for doing ceremonies, setting up for them, and what the procedures are. And I would love to be part of that.
Okay, great.
Project,
Love that.
because I've done a lot of that, and I've done a lot of research, and I've created ceremonies and done a whole lots of different ones.
Okay. Do you mind if I get your contact info from Paula and like talk to Paula
Please.
about it too, and we can all connect? And okay,
please,
great.
Yes, that would be great, because I think we can. And Kevin, if I liked your idea of doing a dedicated YouTube on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's timely, and I now have some energy to deal with that. And you just chock-a-block full of ideas, girl. Let's go.
The ideas are easy. It's the like follow through that like I always kind of need not only connection with other people to as a Kari has this great phrase draft motivation from, but also I kind of need like accountability buddies to make sure that I'm like have a reason to do the things that I say I want to do. So let's all connect and make these things happen.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I like your paint on your hand. What's going on there?
Oh, I can't sit still when I'm listening to things. So I'm practicing with some new paints.
Love it.
New paints, new brushes, new techniques, so
Cool.
yeah.
Awesome.
So
Sally, you always create a great closing ceremony, a healing ceremony. And Kevin mentioned a blood clot. My wife had a blood clot this week, and she's in the hospital for 4 days.
mm,
Maybe you could close with a healing ceremony.
I'd be honored. Mother, Father God, thank you for today's deliberations. Thank you for teaching us more about Be Friend and her journey through her experiences and through learning new healing techniques. Thank you for what we have learned today. We ask that you help us and guide us in taking what we've learned, expanding upon it, and using it to help others as part of our ministry. We have a member, Bobby, who for many years has been a guiding light for our ministry and has helped many, many people through her expertise in counseling and therapy. We ask now that you send healing to her. Send our energy to her that she may heal and become stronger and become more vital and be worthy to help more people in the coming days and years. We ask this in the name of all the healing masters of the universe, Jesus, Buddha, all of them. We ask this in the name of love, and so it is.
So it is. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely.
All right.
And
Next week.
best to Bobby.
Yes, yes.
Many, many blessings
And hugs to
and lots of
Bobby.
love and healing to Bobby.
And take care, Kevin. I hope you feel better soon. Hope you kick it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and pray for Kevin too.
And Paula, who was under the weather.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Paula and Shirley.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
All right. So next
You're
week,
all in my prayers
Bishop
every day.
Terry. Yep. Next week is Bishop Terry, and hopefully we'll do another experiential meditation with her.
Oh, those
All
are
right, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
namaste.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Namaste, everyone.